Hello, this is Mike Swanson, and you're listening to the Wall Street Window podcast. To get a very special guest today lined up for you with a lot of interesting information. It was a really great conversation. I spoke with Rob Clark, who runs the Lone Gunman podcast, a podcast devoted to the Kennedy assassination. And with my post for this show, I'm linking to several of the podcasts Rob did about some of the topics that we discussed. Now, as you know, I have a lot of interests. I'm not just interested in the financial markets. In fact, I'm working on a book about the Vietnam War, writing one. I've written a book titled The War State about the Cold War origins of the military-industrial complex, today's power elite. And I've also had a long-running interest in the assassination of President Kennedy. And there is a large and diverse community of people interested in researching that share information together, and at times even attend conferences. And Rob went to Dallas for the very first time, so I got to ask him about what his impressions were of taking that trip, what the conferences were like, or at least the one he attended. And that was what I mainly wanted to talk with him about. But when you talk about the Kennedy assassination with someone as knowledgeable as him, it's hard not to get into several aspects of it. And that's what we did. So before that talk, one quick commercial break, and then on to Rob Clark, whose podcast you can find just about anywhere. Just type the Lone Gunman podcast on Google, and you'll be able to find it.
Go ahead, caller.
Yeah, I'm interested in the truth about the JFK assassination.
Right. Well, what do you want to know?
Judy Baker's wild claim, Oswald girlfriend, she knew Ruby and Barry, cancer weapons. Really?
I imagine I could claim I have four wheels. It doesn't make me a wagon, but okay.
Oswald was on the kill team and trying to prevent the murder of John Kennedy. Come on now. Has a real expert on the JFK assassination looked into her claims?
Go to Amazon.com, enter Judith Baker in her own words. You'll get results for a digital copy of a book where Walt Brown utilizes her own words and the known evidence in the case to get at, well, a different perspective, let's say. You can get Judith Barry Baker in her own words from the author himself, signed if you request it, by contacting Dr. Brown at KIASJFK@AOL.com. It's a fun book, and it actually dissects the many, many fantastic claims. Judith Barry Baker in her own words.
Thank you for all the great information.
Thanks for having me on your show, man.
Yeah, it's great to talk. This is the first time we ever talked, although I've been listening to your podcast now for several years, maybe since you first started it. It's called The Lone Gunman for people who somehow were asleep during my introduction to you. But I think it's one of the best JFK assassination podcasts. You've had some very interesting guests over the years, like Jerry Patrick Hemming. You even had a guy that I don't remember his name, but he was real big up in the Minuteman organization, and that's something you don't hear from very much. But you just took a trip to Dallas, to the Dallas conference, or one of them. There's two of them, but you attended one of them. And this is the first time you ever won. I'm gonna link to an article that you wrote with some pictures about what you saw in Dallas. But I'll just jump right into what was the trip like.
Well, Mike, I wish I had Jerry Patrick Hemming on my show, but it was his son Felipe.
Oh, that's right. Jerry's dead.
Yeah, that would be a huge boost to my ratings if I could get Jerry Patrick Hemming on the show, and I'd love to. Maybe one day I can channel him through a medium or something. No, but that was great. And but back to the trip to Dallas. It was awesome, man. I mean, finally, after 30 years of looking into this case and being interested in it, I finally got to go see the scene of the crime, man.
Well, I went there twice, and a lot of people say it's smaller than you expect when you get to Dealey Plaza. I don't know if you say you didn't feel like that in the article. I don't know. I guess because people have told us that we weren't that I wasn't that like, oh, this is so tiny, but it was kind of surreal to walk around there. There's no doubt about it. I can't say I solved the case by doing that myself, but it was certainly interesting, to say the least. What did you feel like?
Yeah, like I said, I didn't feel like it was so small. You know what I mean? Like, I got there, and I probably shouldn't have done it, but I kind of ditched my wife as soon as we got to Dealey Plaza. I was like, "All right, see you later. I got shit to do." You know, so I went first thing. You know, you walk in there. We came in from the backside where the depository is, where the parking lot is, and came up through that way. And you know, the first thing I see is there's a Zapruder pedestal. So you know what I got to do. I know what you probably did when you saw it. You got to get up on it. Mm-hmm. So I ran over there and I hopped up on it. I got my phone out and I pointed at the X. Boom. You know, and I'm sitting there. I even did a little video of you know, following a car that turned the corner on Elm Street and followed it all the way to the underpass, and you know, I did all the touristy things. You know, but just like you said, being there is just a surreal feeling. Like, okay, I just wanted to. I mean, I was all over the place, man. I was, you know, running down to the street, running across the street, running back up, running back behind the fence, going down the overpass. You know, I was taking everything in, dude, because I just don't. It took 30 years to get there, and I don't know if I'll ever go back or if I'll ever make it there again. And that was my main reason for going to Dallas, was just to see as much as I could. You know, I really wasn't going for the conference. That was icing on the cake. You know what I mean? I wanted to go to Dallas and see everything with my own two eyes once and for all and get a better sense of how the assassination went down, and of course Oswald's movements and everything else like that.
Well, one thing about Dewey Plaza, I'm looking at your picture of the overpass. I went on top of the overpass, and one thing about that is it's very close to that picket fence, and the witnesses on that overpass said that they, or at least one of them said they saw some smoke or smelled some smoke. So they're close enough to have done that. But you did a lot. You saw a lot more things than I did. You saw different parts of the school book depository. You got this picture of this elevator shaft. But you also did a lot more than I did of looking at Oswald's movements after the assassination. That's, if I'm correct, you went to the scene where Tippit was even shot.
Yeah. I mean, I had gotten tickets to the sixth floor museum, not because I really cared about seeing the exhibits and, you know, listening to Pierce Allman, but I wanted to be in the building. I wanted to get up on the sixth floor. I wanted to see where Oswald and Frazier and all these guys worked. I wanted to see the layout. I wanted to take it all in and think, okay, what's, you know, is this possible? Is that possible? You know, and just see how everything was laid out. And the way they have it up there now, it's hard to get a sense of the overall floor, you know, because they have it partitioned off with all of these gigantic boards, you know, with like pictures of the assassination and different things like that, different exhibits. And as you go, you know, you're supposed to walk around and be led around by Pierce Allman and listen to the, you know, the diatribe at every board. And as soon as I got to that first board and I heard him start talking, dude, I turned my headphones off. I put them down around my neck. And I just started walking. I made a beeline for the window. And, of course, you can't get to the actual window that they say he fired out of. You can get to the third window over. And you can kind of get a sense of how far away he was and how quote-unquote, easy or not easy the shot would have been from there. But then I also wanted to see, okay, you know, if there's boxes stacked up everywhere, how, you know, much like a maze, you know, how long would it have taken him to get from there, you know, over to the back stairway or hide the gun, then to the back stairway, then down the stairs, yada, yada, yada. But that was the main reason I wanted to go to the sixth floor museum, just to see the building itself. I could care less about the actual museum part of it. I mean, great. They have Lee Harvey Oswald's wedding ring on display. Good job. You know, and they have, you know, all the cameras from the photos that day. Okay, great. They have Jack Ruby's hat. They have James Lavelle's suit. You know, that's about it. and the rest of it is just a dog and pony show. And like you mentioned, I wanted to see where Tippett was killed. So a buddy of mine I've known him on Facebook for years, and he actually used to be a lone nutter and then came over to the other side, which is very rare. More likely it goes the other way. But he said he was going to do a thing at Tippett's scene of the crime at about 1:15. So after the big dog and pony show there on the grassy knoll, to quote commemorate JFK's life, have a moment of silence and all that, we made our way over to 10th and Patton.
Well, what is reading the account of the Tippett shooting? It's something I never really paid that much attention to, and then I started, trying to look into it a couple years ago, and honestly, I couldn't come to a conclusion. Because it's so confusing to me. This witness says this, and then what about the bullets don't make, they find the guy's wallet at the scene. It's just really bizarre.
Yeah.
More bizarre maybe than
makes sense.
Yeah, none of it makes sense. So what did you learn from it?
Well, somebody painted an X there where Tippett was killed, which helped a lot. And then the guy I met up with, he was a local Dallas native, and he's been going here for years, and he's done the research, and so it was helpful to have him there to actually point out where the various witnesses were.
Okay.
So he was like, Akita Clemens lived there, and Domingo Benavides was parked over there, and so was here, so was there, and you talk about smaller than what I thought it was. I mean, a lot of it's gone. I mean, the road, Patton Street, like it just dead ends into tennis courts now, and a lot of the houses have been torn down and rebuilt. There's only, I think, one or two original houses on that street that you could even recognize from pictures anymore. And the whole thing has really changed. But to really, like, this whole thing went down, and all of these witnesses were literally maybe at the most 50 feet away from where Tippett was shot. So it's hard to believe that all these different people saw all these different things, and it's really hard to come up with anything that makes sense from any of them.
Yeah. See, when I read their testimony, you think they're hundreds of feet away or something, not that close.
Yeah, I mean, it's all these witnesses are contained in like a 1-block radius. Maybe. I mean, it's not really even that far. When you're looking at everything and you figure out, okay, the cab driver was here, Benavides was here, Keila Clemens was here, and so was here. You're like, wow, okay, so they were that close to seeing all of this go down, yet they can't agree on anything. And there's even a time discrepancy. How can somebody be so off? And then, the guy told me, he said, like where Clemens was standing waiting for the bus, the bus came at like 1:14.
Okay.
So, of course,
So it had to be before then, right?
Yeah, I mean, unless the bus was running late.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the death certificate says 1:16. There was a lady in the house across the street who heard shots at 1:06 because she was watching TV and just happened to see what was coming on and looked at the clock and then went outside, and so it's hard to actually pin down the actual time of Tippett's death. But it's important because another thing that never made sense to me, Mike, was trying to figure out how Oswald got out of the depository, onto a bus, into a cab, back to his rooming house, 7 blocks up, back to his rooming house, then seen standing on a corner, not walking.
Well, one thing about that story. Well, go ahead. I don't mean to interrupt you.
Well, I was just saying, and then walk, what is it, 0.8 miles or whatever, to the scene of the Tippett murder, and in Google Maps, it takes 16 minutes to walk. And
oh wow,
so it just you try to. I don't know. In the article, I did a better job of laying everything out of, okay, he was on the bus by this time. Then he got off the bus. Then he walked to the Greyhound station 3.5 blocks away. Then he got into a cab. Then the cab took him 7 blocks past his rooming house, and he had to walk back there. All this stuff takes time. I mean, he wasn't the Flash. Oswald was not the Flash. And when he supposedly left Earlene Roberts' house, she peeked out the window and saw him standing on the corner of Zang's and Beckley. And she said this was roughly 1:05. So even if he's walking, he can't get there by 1:16. There's just no possible way. Which has led me into, I didn't come up with it, but the area of research that I'm focusing on when it comes to who actually killed Tippit and who fled the scene. And, that's something that I've been working on the past couple of years and trying to figure out. And to me, my solution makes better sense than the official version.
Well, the story about Oswald leaving the school book depository, getting on the bus, getting in the cab, and so forth, I didn't know this until I went last year. And I went to the Texas School Book Depository because someone was putting on a small conference about the assassination. It was actually some sort of investment advisor putting on an event. And he invited a couple speakers, and one of them was Hugh Ainsworth, who was a Dallas week. What's the new? He was a reporter in Dallas, and broke a lot of the stories. And he claimed that he discovered Oswald's movements, and he broke that story by interviewing people or whatever. So whatever whatever that's worth, but he's the one that originated the story. That's all that matters to me. That's what I got out of it. Not that I necessarily believe it. It's just, I don't know. Well, who do you if you don't want to say, you ain't got to, I'm just asking, but do you think Oswald shot Tippit or someone else? You got someone else specifically in mind?
I do. And I've done shows about it, and from the way everything that I know, and we'd be here for an hour if I went through everything. But to nutshell it for you, I think that Larry Crayford, Jack Ruby's barman or Boy Friday or whatever you want to call him, was actually the one that shot Tippit.
Okay.
And there's several reasons why I think this. And just to name a few, Mike, real quick.
Okay.
The jacket found that was supposedly thrown under the Oldsmobile there by the Texaco station as, quote, Oswald fled. It happened to be an Eisenhower type jacket, of which Oswald didn't own. Marina even said that's not his jacket. He didn't own anything like that. And from the dry cleaning tags found the jacket, it was sold in, or not the dry cleaning tags, but the tag itself, where the jacket was made, was by a clothier in California. Now, in the early 60s, after Crayford got out of the Army, he lived in San Francisco and worked for the mob as a hitman. And this is according to his brother, and later Crayford admitted it to researcher Peter Whitney, who finally tracked him down in the 80s. And he was supposedly run out of town because he knocked up somebody in the family that he shouldn't have. And they ran him out of town, basically. And he kind of made his way down the coast of California, working some odd jobs, until he got to Texas. The way Tippit was murdered, okay, three shots to the chest. And then most of the witnesses say that he came around the car and put one in the head. Mm-hmm. That to me is a mafia style execution. If it was Oswald, I would think, okay, he might have shot him 3 times in the chest, and then he would have turned and ran.
Okay? Yeah, it's not someone just trying to get away from the police.
No, he wanted to make sure that this guy wasn't going to get up and say who he was.
Yeah.
My feeling on the matter is, Crayford is responsible for a lot of the Oswald sightings with Jack Ruby because he did resemble Oswald. I mean, people always say, "Oh, I saw Oswald in the Carousel Club." Well, no, that's probably Larry Crayford. Mm-hmm. I saw Oswald with Ruby at an electronics store. Nope, that was Larry Crayford. I saw Oswald eating in our diner with Jack Ruby. Nope, sorry, that's Larry Crayford. Okay, and and there is reports that actually, of Oswald sightings before the assassination that could not have been Oswald. And even on the day of the assassination, we have somebody posing as Oswald who bought tickets to a Dick Clark variety show at the Top 10 record store the morning of the assassination. We have somebody at a convenience store buying peanut brittle and a beer and producing a driver's license that said Lee Harvey Oswald on it. And the guy remembered the name because he said, "Oh, isn't that just a great Jewish name?" Okay, these are all FBI reports. Okay, they happened. So somebody, if you believe that somebody was impersonating Oswald, they had to have Oswald identification on them in a wallet. All right, now say Tippett's an innocent party to all this stuff. He has a general description of what he's looking for. Crayford meets it, so he pulls up and says, "Hey, excuse me, sir. You mind if I see some identification?" And he looks at there and he's, "Okay, well, that's Lee Harvey. That's the guy I'm looking for." And he gets out of the car and starts to draw his gun. And, the other guy's just a little bit quicker on the draw. And he runs and he runs. And he heads to the Texas Theater. And apparently this may have been a meeting place. I don't know. The funny thing is that Jack Ruby actually lived a couple blocks over from 10th and Patton. That's interesting.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so you have that. Plus, you have the testimony of Bernard Hare, who owned Bernie's Hobby Shop, which is a little bit down from the Texas Theater, and they share an alley in the back. Okay, for years, this guy had thought he saw Oswald arrested and taken out the back of the theater, until he saw the famous picture of Oswald being led out the front of the theater, which led him to believe, okay, what did I see? And there's two different police reports saying that Oswald was arrested in the balcony of the Texas Theater. Well, we know that's not true. Okay, so what if, there was two people arrested in the Texas Theater, and we know, Oswald had identification on him after he was arrested. Then you have the problem with two wallets. Well, right. You don't have a problem with two wallets if one of them was the one that Larry Crayford was using, and Oswald had his own. So that problem solved. And when they realize who this guy is that they got, whoever is, quote, masterminding this assassination had to have pull with the Dallas Police Department, and he was let go. And curiously enough, guess who gets the hell out of Dallas on November 23rd as quick as he can and hitchhikes to Michigan?
Well, he's
Larry
smart
Crayford.
Because some of Ruby's buddies didn't make it out of Dallas.
Right. So, yeah, it's circumstantial stuff, okay? But when you look at it as a whole, it makes more sense to me than Oswald, was running a marathon that day, getting to all these places, and doing all these things that are attributed to him. And, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not. But it makes more sense to me than Oswald did it.
So you have concluded, though, by going here, it does seem clear that Oswald could not have walked these distances to do all this stuff. He would have had to run, basically.
And it makes no sense. None of it makes any sense.
Of course, you're not going to run, because that's going to draw too much attention to you.
Right. And even if you speed walk, I mean, Mike, look, we left 10th and Patton, okay, and we headed for the Texas Theater, and it was 0.6 of a mile away. Took us about 13 minutes to walk.
Yeah.
It's a hike. I mean, it's
Sure.
it's a busy street. You know, I mean, I don't know how it was in '63, but
It's probably busier.
it's busy. You know what I mean? There's cars both ways, 2 lanes each way, and there's businesses that look like they've been there since the '60s,
Yeah.
lining both sides of that street. And so we walked up and we saw where the Hardy shoe store used to be, where Johnny Brewer supposedly saw Oswald in quotes. Stop in and take a breath and breather and kind of act weird. And then, like I said in the article, we finally get to the Texas Theater, and where the ticket booth is, it's right in between both doors, the entrance and the exit.
Mm-hmm.
And if Julia Postal did not see Oswald come in that place, then she is legally blind. I'm sorry. She just is blind. And then you have people in the theater like Butch Burroughs who said, he sold him popcorn at a certain time and, went up to the balcony, whatever. It's hard to make out. None of it makes any sense. We don't have much testimony from the other folks that are in the theater at the time. Somehow that's been lost. Shocker. I mean, we know George Applin was in there, but there was also a lot of other people actually in that theater that saw what was going on in there. And if you think that Oswald knew the gig was up then, why didn't he pull a gun out and just start shooting cops as they came in the door? I mean,
it doesn't. I mean, you, in some ways, you know more about this stuff than I do, but it seems. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like Oswald didn't really understand what was going on completely until hours after the assassination. When if you go by what he was saying on television, I'm not convinced that he even had a pistol on him at the time. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm fairly confident it was probably planted on him at the theater. That's why they couldn't just kill him outright. And the whole story, the miraculous story of Nick McDonald, stopping the trigger with the skin between his forefinger and his thumb, and all this other stuff, and then the bullets being found 5 hours later after he's in custody. I don't know how you missed that on a pat down, but okay. Just little things like that just make you wonder.
Would you think he knew what he was being arrested for when he was arrested?
Well, that's the interesting thing, man. I've talked a lot with Bart about this, and especially the last show I did with him. And it seems to me like he was almost being kept from, like, his interrogations weren't really interrogations.
Yeah, it's very strange. That's
it was
kind
almost
of what
like a stalling tactic, because the DPD didn't know what to do with him. Okay, they had him for the Tippit murder, supposedly. And that's all he knew. He's told him, I didn't shoot any police officer. I didn't shoot anybody. And, he kept asking for some form of legal representation, which they several times denied him. And a lot of people don't know, and thanks to Bart, Malcolm Blunt, we now know that Oswald gave them an alibi for the shooting. For all these years, people just assumed they didn't have an alibi. Mike,
you talking about? He said he was outside, right, or by the door?
Yeah, I mean, we had Fritz's handwritten notes come out, a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But he wrote those 3 days later. Okay, and in those notes, it said in there
out in front or something, right?
Out in front with Bill
That's
Shelley.
It. Yeah.
Okay, so now a person on the other side could easily argue that is, he's lying. He knew Shelley went out to watch the parade, blah blah blah. And then up pops Bookout, or was it Bookout? Yeah, Bookout's Hosty, James Hosty, FBI, his handwritten notes that he actually took at the first interrogation of Oswald at 3:16 p.m. And he wrote it down as Oswald talked. And Oswald said a lot of stuff. He admitted to living in. He said he's in the Marines. He lived in Russia for 2.5 years. He had a Russian wife. On and on and on. He told them everything. Okay, and then he says that he went upstairs to get a Coke, and then came back down to eat his lunch. And then he went outside to watch the presidential parade. Now, that, to me, is an alibi right off the bat. Boom. And with the work that Stan Dane and Bart and all these guys over there at Dealey Plaza UK and the ROKC forums have been doing for these years, trying to figure out who this prayer man person is, and captured in the Darnell and the Wigman films, could it possibly be that, okay, the whole second floor lunch encounter didn't really happen like we think it did? That it didn't happen on the second floor? That the encounter probably happened on the first floor as soon as they went in the building? Because, Mike, does it make sense to go eat your lunch without anything to drink and then go upstairs to get something to drink? To me, it doesn't. I like to have something to drink while I'm eating my lunch, okay? And that's what Oswald said he did. He went upstairs, he got a drink, and he came down and ate his lunch on the first floor. And then he said he walked outside, and to me, the person that's captured in that prayer man image was somebody that worked in that building, that a white male that cannot be accounted for anywhere else, that probably slipped out through the doors unnoticed because everybody's focused on the parade and the president is coming. Sure. It's not out of the realm of possibility that this guy snuck out unnoticed, stood back behind everybody in the shadows, and as President Kennedy turns the corner and is shot, that's his moment of clarity. Oh shit, something's going wrong. Maybe he knows something, maybe he doesn't, but something clicks for him, and he's got to do something and go somewhere to meet somebody. Okay, and so he slips back in the doors unnoticed and unseen because now everybody's focused on what just happened and the pandemonium and all that. Okay, so then shortly after that you have Truly and Baker running into the building. They're going to hit Oswald on the first floor, not the second. So I think people like Bart are doing some great work on the case to advance it forward, to finally get to some of the truth that's been hidden from us for 56 years.
Well, I think someone, maybe it was him, I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think somebody found Baker made two statements, perhaps? Maybe.
Right, yeah. Nothing about the whole Coca-Cola incident and all that wasn't mentioned the first time, or was scratched out or something.
Okay, something funny like that.
There's something hanky going on there. Because there's other people like Otis Campbell, who stated that, it was the first floor. And, it's not just... A lot of people think, okay, they see the picture of a prayer man. Okay, with a blurry photo, you can't tell what it is. You can't say it's Oswald definitively. But what Bart and all the guys have done, and Stan Dane, they supplement it with their own documentation and various news stories and reports and affidavits, and they put them all together to figure out that the second floor lunchroom encounter didn't happen. And that it probably happened on the first floor. And now we have in Oswald, in his own words, as soon as he's arrested, giving them an alibi. And he's writing it down just as he said. I went up and got a Coke, came down, ate, went outside to watch the presidential parade. There it is, Mike. It doesn't get much clearer than that. He said it twice. And Fritz even remembered he said it 3 days later when he wrote it down. But after that, there's no mention. And we have not had these notes, for the past. Yeah, that's
nowhere
years.
in the Warren Commission report or anywhere else, and then the notes appear. And there they are. Yeah.
Yep. They formulated this story that made it feasible for Oswald to escape the sixth floor and make it to the second floor in the amount of time it took for Baker and Truly to get there. To make it feasible, that Oswald could have shot, and then he only got down to the second floor, where, Okay, you just shot the president. I'm going for a Coke. I mean, really?
Well, a couple years ago, I read when I was younger, lots and lots of Kennedy assassination books, and I never read the Warren Commission report. And I decided to read the Warren Commission report, but try to do it with the perspective of someone that doesn't know anything, that's new, and just see, is it believable or not? And there's 2 or 3 things in there that give me the same feeling of what you're talking about. And that is discrepancies that do not add up to what is being concluded in the Warren Commission report. And therefore, it leaves you wondering, and you can't figure out what really happened. So I don't want to go into the whole detail about all this. Really want to get more about your opinions, but just to name one of them, how Oswald got the rifle into the Texas school book building. They said he brought it in a paper bag, and then after the assassination, and then get this bag, and then you read the Warren Commission thing, and anyway, there's different accounts of the size of the bag, and Oswald took a trip was driven to work by Buell Frazier, a co-worker who has his account that doesn't make a rifle fit in the bag, and I was reading this in the Warren Commission report thinking there is no bag. It's like, so this whole thing, or the bag was created later after the assassination, or it just is kind of like nonsensical. And it's not the only thing like that, but you find 2 or 3 things like that, and it left me with the feeling like I'll never be able to figure out every single little detail, but something is really messed up systematically in a lot of this.
And you look at the bag problem, okay? We have a picture of them taking the bag out of the depository on a stick or a rifle.
Yeah, that picture.
It's freaking huge, dude, okay? It's huge. It's big enough to carry a rifle.
It's crazy. It's like taller than the men.
Okay, and Buell Frazier swears that this package that Oswald had that day was no more than 2 feet. Okay, that's 24 inches. Give him even 28 inches, okay? And he's maintained this over the years. It was only a 2 feet long package. All right, well, there's no rifle, especially the Carcano, that can be broken down to fit in a package that's 2 feet long. It has a gigantic wooden stock on it. It was meant to be a carbine with a bayonet attachment. It had a very short barrel for that reason, and most of this gun was stock. It wasn't like 2 feet of barrel sticking out of this thing. Okay, we were talking maybe 5 or 6 inches of barrel. So you can't break down the wooden stock under 30 inches. It just doesn't work. So what? And this is another area that I've kind of focused on in the past couple years is Buell Frazier, because I think he's very key to the figuring out the mystery of what really happened, because they arrested this kid. He was 19 years old at the time, scared out of his gourd, and I think he lied. I think he lied about the package. Either Oswald didn't have a package at all, okay, period, or he had a package, a big one, that held a rifle, and either Frazier was afraid to say that he knew Oswald had a rifle, or he was persuaded by the police and the powers that be to say that Oswald did have a package. And then he said, and he gave them their package, but he said it was no more than 2 feet long. He gave them what they wanted, but yet he didn't give them what they wanted. You understand what I'm saying?
That's what happened, yeah.
So either way, he lied about the package, because there was no 2-foot bag found. We know that gun can't fit into a 2-foot bag, period. And we know that there was a big bag found. They pulled it out of the depository. Okay? And here's the thing. Frazier was a rifle owner. He was a hunter. He came from rural Texas. He used to deer hunt. He owned a 313 Enfield hunting rifle. And if you own a rifle, okay, and you have a case for that rifle, be it a leather case, be it a cloth case, be it a hard shell case, or be it a paper bag, Mike, you know what's in that package. Okay, only some things are that long.
Mm-hmm.
And they're hefted around and carried like a rifle. Okay? And rifles in the depository weren't a rare thing. You know? And for all innocuous purposes, you know, Oswald could have told Frazier, hey, look, man, you know, I'm going to sell this gun to somebody today, or I'm going to go to the store and get it sighted in, or he could have told him anything. You know? And Frazier would have probably believed him. And maybe, and I'm not saying Oswald had that rifle on the 6th floor shooting, because I don't believe that. But what I'm saying is that he could have been persuaded through whatever circumstances, because that rifle didn't belong to Lee Oswald. We have to remember this. It belonged to A.J. Heidel, who was a Castro sympathizer, okay, and a big high up in the Fair Play for Cuba Committee in New Orleans, okay. You know, and so if that rifle would have been found in that depository and tied back to Alec Heidel, a Castro sympathizer, then guess who gets blamed? If that's as far as it went, Mike.
Yeah, sure. It's all in paper.
Yeah, so maybe Oswald was convinced that, look, this rifle never going to be tied back to you. It's in this guy's
Heidel's name. Yeah.
It's in Heidel's name. You know, we got him in the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, you know, yada, yada. All we need you to do is get this rifle to the 6th floor of this building, put it here, throw some shells down, and get the hell out of there. And, you know, maybe we'll take some pot shots at Kennedy, scare him a little bit. Your rifle will be tied back to some Castro sympathizer, and finally, maybe Kennedy will do something about those commies 60 miles off our shore. You know what I'm saying? The plot could have been something like that. You know, Oswald could have been convinced to do that. You know what I mean? If he was really like a patriotic American, really a Marine, really not pro-Castro, but really anti-Castro. And as a lot of the sentiment was in Texas at the time, you know, a little bit anti-Kennedy, feeling he was maybe a little soft on communism.
Sure.
So, you know, you got to take all these things into consideration when you look at this case, and, you know, really try to rethink things and think about things in a different light and use a little logic and common sense and kind of put yourself in that position. You know, okay, if I was Frazier and they're thinking about charging me as an accessory to murder, am I going to lie? You know, and say I didn't know nothing about a rifle? Well, hell yeah, probably so. You know what I mean? So, not that I have any hard feelings against Frazier. I think it's time that the truth comes out, and once and for all, we can figure this thing out, Mike.
Well, did you see him there? When I went, he was at Dewey Plaza selling curtain rods.
Frazier?
He was selling curtain rods. Yeah.
Oh.
And he was set up with the table, I think right next to Robert Grodin, but
wow.
he was selling curtain rods, and I was with Chuck Ocelli, right? And we went up to him, but neither one of us, we probably talked over 10 or 15 minutes, but it was just all small talk. You know, he talked about somewhere he's moved and lived at, you know, on a lake or something. You know, we didn't talk about the assassination, but I had the feeling, you know, I'm talking to a man who knows something he's never told, and yeah, I'm not going to, you know, that's the feeling I had, you know, but I also felt like if someone would be asking somebody, hey, did you commit murder or something? You know, they're not, you just,
yeah. I mean, I don't think it's that bad, but
no, it ain't that bad. No, I don't mean that, but
yeah. And I've heard he's writing a book with Hugh Ainsworth, as a matter of fact, and he has been for a couple years now. So maybe we'll get the truth in that book, and maybe we won't. But you know, you put this all together with the trouble the HSCA had in talking to Frazier. You look at his transcript from his interview with the HSCA, and Mike, I swear, a part of it, it says that he, as I was standing right there on the stairs, and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I know he had the rifle.
That's what he says in the interview.
That's what he says in the HSCA interview.
Oh, wow.
That's the transcript. So what does that say? You know, I mean, you can only take that so many ways, Mike. I mean, to me, you know, he's saying something to the people that he thinks is never going to get out. You know, a lot of those people that talk to the HSCA were given immunity for their testimony. They had trouble pinning Frazier down to actually even talk to him. He made him go through a lawyer, and he put him off like 3 or 4 times before they could actually get to him. And yeah, I mean, that is the piece. You know, he had 4 tapes that were recorded during his HSCA interview, and 2 of them are unlistenable, and the other 2 are, let's just say, of somewhat better quality than unlistenable. And you know, they were transcribed, and that is what it says. You know, and then you look at all this stuff from the depository workers about how Frazier brought Oswald to work every day, you know, not just when he went to Irving, and all this other stuff. And that when Frazier arrived to work that morning and parked, he was by himself because somebody said, "Hey, where's your rider?" "Oh, I dropped him off at the building."
Well, one thing I will say is, you know, when we met him, you could just tell he seemed like a really nice person. Just his energy or something. Not like he's really energetic, but you know, an older, you know, he's in his 70s or whatnot. But he just seemed like a very kind and nice person.
Yeah,
whatever,
Mike,
whatever that's worth.
I've lost friends saying what I just said because, you know, a lot of these Dallasites know Frazier, known him for years. Say, oh, he's a nice guy, he'd never lie, blah, blah, blah. Well, how well do you really know somebody, Mike? How well do you really know somebody who's been keeping a horrible secret?
Well, I mean, we know it doesn't. The stuff doesn't add up. I mean, honestly, I would just assume that he, you know, wasn't doing anything nefarious, and they arrested him after the assassination and questioned him, and supposedly tried to get Frazier to sign a statement saying he was a part of it. Yeah. So he was scared. You know? He was scared to death. So I think it's safe to assume that the most simplest conclusion is that he had to say something to get out of this situation. Yeah, and you can't blame him for that.
His lie detector test results are nowhere to be found. You know, that they said they were in the archives, and when Bart tried to request them after everything had been released, he got he got 17 pages, okay, from the file marked Buell Wesley Frazier polygraph.
Hey, when he's doing that, is he going to the archives or writing them?
No, he's writing them. He's requesting documents.
Oh, you can do that? Okay.
Yeah. And he got back 17 pages of things like this. Dear Mr. Attorney General, this is from 1978. In connection with its investigation into the circumstances surrounding the death of President Kennedy, the Select Committee requests access to any and all documents pertaining to the polygraph examination given to Buell Frazier by Detective Lewis, polygraph operator with the Dallas Police Department. Your continuing cooperation is appreciated. Signed, Robert Blakey. Okay? And then the City of Dallas replies, Dear Mr. Blakey, this letter is in response to your communication. A search of the polygraph examination indices was conducted, and there were no documents therein regarding the polygraph examination which was given to Buell Frazier by Detective Lewis. All physical evidence and documents collected in regard to the assassination of President Kennedy, murder of Lee Harvey Oswald, and arrest of Jack Ruby were released to the FBI and Secret Service upon their request. Subsequently, so basically, it was a wild goose chase, and his actual polygraph results are nowhere to be found. The FBI says they don't have them. City of Dallas says they don't have them. Secret Service says they don't have them. So, it goes on and on and on and on.
Someone lost them.
And, Frazier hasn't really talked to researchers over the years, whether it be for books or sat and answered questions by researchers. He comes out of his shell and does a little news piece, every couple years where, it'd be softball questions by the local TV reporter, whatever.
Sure.
And then he disappears. And, why is that? Why is that?
Well,
there's got to be a reason.
One interesting thing about the statements he has made is he seems to be adamant that Oswald, well, I should rephrase this. He suggests that Oswald did not do it. That he doesn't think Oswald did it. He implies that he says Oswald was good with his family, and it's hard for him to imagine that Oswald did it. So it's kind of funny, he's kind of created a story with the curtain rod, with the paper bag, that enables him to support the Warren Commission, or what the police wanted him to say, but then distance himself from the idea that Oswald did the assassination.
Right. He's playing both sides, and you can't do that. But here, Mike, I found the exact quote from the HSCA. Frazier, he answers, no, I didn't know that he'd been caught, but I will tell you this, I knew that he had the rifle. Moriarty says, Frazier says, he did, and I said to myself, oh my God, that was the first thing right there on the steps. I also knew that I didn't want to get pulled in. Moriarty says, So there you go.
Moriarty should have asked some more questions.
Yeah. Can you please explain that, Mr. Frazier, a little bit better? So something is rotten in Denmark with all that business, and that's what I've been trying to parse out and kind of prove that Frazier's been lying. And I've lost friends over it, because how dare I suggest that nice guy Bill Frazier has been lying all these years? But I want the truth. I don't care about, I don't care how nice you are. I want the truth, Mike.
Well, at some point you would think whatever the truth is, and he's not the only one, I'm sure, that knows some things. At some point you'd think they could talk without being scared. I don't know. It's hard to, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know. What do you think? I don't know. Who's gonna? Or maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe it is so scary. I'm not in anyone's shoes like that. You still there? Uh-oh.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, it is just a Skype thing. But yeah,
this far gone. He's 75 years old. It's time, man. We're losing more and more people that were key witnesses to the assassination. I know they rolled Ruth Payne out this year in Dallas, and had her talk on the 6th floor. We lost Robert Oswald last year. Of course, Marina is still alive, but they're all in their 70s. How much longer are these people going to be around that I think know more truth than what they're letting on?
And for sure, all she has to do is tell us what happened after the assassination. How are you treated with the Secret Service and the people who are questioning her?
Yeah,
what's the story with her statements that changed?
I think there's more to Marina than meets the eye as well, but we'll save that.
Were you a spy? Because some of the Warren Commission people thought you were.
Yep.
So, what was your life like in Russia? Just all kinds of stuff. So,
it's not out of the realm of possibility. Okay, that the Russians weren't stupid, Mike. They knew that any American defecting to Russia at the height of the Cold War was suspect. Were they really sincere, or is there something else going on here? And you bet your bottom dollar that somebody, i.e. Marina, was sicked on them to keep an eye on them to see what they were really up to.
Well, I was just, at the least, Richard Russell was a senator. He was a Warren Commission member. And he has made statements saying he didn't believe the single bullet theory, even though he signed on to the conclusions of the Warren Commission. But he also said he believed Marina Oswald was a spy. And you couldn't believe a word she said. Yet, much of the Warren Commission is based on her testimony. Yeah. She claims Oswald shot at General Walker and was thinking about getting Nixon, all kinds of silly stuff.
Well, what do you think James Hosty was doing sniffing around Ruth Payne's house? He wasn't worried about Lee Oswald.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because
that's right.
At that point in time, they knew that any Russian coming back into the country that married an American in Russia was more than likely a sleeper agent or spy. So they were keeping tabs on Marina. This is something the FBI couldn't admit to because, of course, they would have looked inept in their duty and kind of overlooking, her crazy husband who was acting like a pro-Castro, commie-loving pinko, and not really, they were supposedly opening his mail, and how did he actually get the guns if they were opening his mail? There's all this stuff that doesn't make any sense.
Well, I'm looking at the clock. I've already been talking for 50 minutes, so I want to get back to your experience going to Dallas and the conference you went to. There's two conferences. I know the Judy Baker event, and you went to the Kappa event. John Newman was there, Jim Diogenio. I think Oliver Stone made an appearance. So what was your impressions of going to the Dallas conference?
Oh yeah, we got sidetracked a little bit there.
Well, this is what this topic does.
I know. But yes, back to the conference.
It's fun to talk about too.
So I did that whole thing Friday. I got all of that out of my system and out of the way, and seeing everything. So Saturday was conference day. I missed the first day, which was Friday, and just looking through the lineup, I don't know. I wasn't too terribly upset about missing some of it. But what I got to see Bill Simpich, I got to see John Newman, I got to see James Wagenford, I got to see Ralph Moet Larson, a former intelligence analyst with the CIA. So I got to see a lot of different things. Now I saw James Wagenford from Life magazine 5 years ago at a conference, and I've seen David Josephs. I've had him on my show 4 years ago. Presenting some of this information that's been around for a while. It just puzzled me why are we having them in a conference now 5 years later? Because to me, Mike, conferences should be somewhere where highly respected researchers doing the best research out there have their research highlighted, and we learn new things. That doesn't require me, that we couldn't have learned otherwise. Mm-hmm. Because as diverse as our community is, yes, there are a lot of us that are online. Yes, it makes things a lot easier to share information and network. But there's a lot of researchers out there who have nothing to do with the internet. They kind of do their own thing on the fringe. They don't really get on Facebook much. They kind of stick to they do their own thing in their own lane. And that's who I want to hear from. Because being online is one thing, and people call themselves, "Oh, I'm a researcher." I've read one book, and okay, I'm in a Facebook group. Well, okay, now you know it all. Then now you've solved the assassination, sir. Congratulations. But I always thought conferences should be something special. Something that I'm taking time out of my life to venture to and come out of pocket for to learn new information. And I just came away from the conference feeling that I didn't really learn anything new. And of course, that's not the reason I went to Dallas. I went to Dallas, see Dealey Plaza, see the depository, see everything else. And like I said, the conference was just happened to be icing on the cake. You know, they had Oliver Stone speaking at the banquet, Cyril Wecht speaking at the banquet, and there's something else that I didn't really agree with, Mike.
Mm.
And now you went when Lancer was still Lancer. There was no Kappa, but Judy was doing her conference at the same time Lancer was.
Oh yeah. I mean, I had the impression that she was hoping that they would go out of business and she'd be the only game in town.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think Kappa came along, and there's a lot of folks still from Lancer involved with Kappa that have, you know, kind of continued things on a little bit. And of course, you know, there's some new faces at Kappa that weren't really part of Lancer, but you know, they've kind of taken over the Lancer mantle. You know, Deborah Conway was there, you know, in charge of the bookstore. You know, so it's not too far removed from things. And people associated with Lancer are pretty much associated with Kappa, and because it's a legitimate organization as opposed to, you know, the JudyCon where, you know, everybody that's ever written a book on the Kennedy assassination, be it whether James Files, be it whether LBJ did it, be it whether, Malcolm Mac Wallace did it, or whatever. You know, whatever kooky theory is being, you know, thrown out there, that's who's at Judy conference, okay? And just to see what the Grassy Knoll ceremony has become from when John Judge and Copa did it to what it is now, he'd be rolling in his grave, seeing the two biggest frauds, in my opinion, in the Kennedy assassination mythos holding court on the Grassy Knoll. And I'm speaking of Judith Baker and Beverly Oliver. And that's who's running the show on the Grassy Knoll. And to get back to what I was saying earlier, okay, Cyril Wecht is supposed to be the chairman of the board of Kappa, okay? Yet, why is he speaking at JudyCon?
I don't understand that either. I really don't understand that.
Because when you do something like that, Mike, you're only adding legitimacy to their cause. Okay? Now, you're supposed to be two competing organizations here. Why is the chairman of the board of Kappa speaking?
Well, the only reason I can think of it would be the same reason Oliver Stone. I saw pictures of Oliver Stone had gone over there.
He was staying over there, Mike. He didn't go over there.
I didn't know that.
He was over there more than he was at Kappa. The only time he was at Kappa that I saw, okay, he was there for John Newman's presentation, and he left. And then he came back for the banquet that night, and then he left right after the banquet. Like, I couldn't even get to him before he left.
Well, I'm just thinking Oliver Stone's got a documentary coming out in a couple months, and Cyril Wecht does conferences of his own every 10 years. So it might be, I agree with you. I mean, on one, I had the same feeling. When I went to Dallas twice, and especially the first time, I really felt going around the Dealey Plaza and seeing the same thing you're talking about, that this is really bad. This is like a clown show. I for lack of a better phrase, I wish I had a better one at the moment, but just a lot of frauds, and here we all are, and what is this? You know, this isn't real serious research. This isn't getting us closer to the truth. It's counterproductive to the truth. And it's putting a downer. It's just a bad vibe, you know, for the whole thing, and I think that's all. That's how I felt. I mean, that was one of the big takeaways I had going there. Is there's a lot of not just bad research, but just fraudulent stuff with some of these people, but. From the perspective of Stone and Cyril Wecht, I'm just thinking they just want everyone to support what it is they're doing, and that's their overriding priority. They don't want to make some of these people angry, you know.
Ka-ching, Mike! You hit the nail right on the quarter. It's all about the dollars, buddy, and that's what it comes down to. And because if it was about the truth, this kind of interaction would not be going on.
Yeah.
Oliver Stone, Jim DiEugenio is writing his documentary, basically loosely based on the updated edition of Destiny Betrayed and the new file releases.
And he doesn't believe in Baker.
Who?
DiEugenio.
No, absolutely not. But yet we have quotes from people who were close enough to hear Oliver Stone talking to Judy Baker for 3 hours, mind you. Judith, don't worry, I believe you. Now, if that's not enough to make your stomach turn, I don't know what is.
Well, it rise, going there, and then just the whole topic itself. But when you go there, you do experience the JFK so-called research community, at least a portion of it, that goes to these Dallas conferences. And it does make you wonder, what is the future of the case? And it's not going to be made at these conferences. That's
no.
For sure.
The future is bleak. Here's the future, Mike. The future is guys like us having on folks that are doing the real research and getting the word out there. Because I can guarantee you this. More people have listened to my show in 5 years than every JFK conference ever, anywhere combined, ever. Okay? And if that's what the whole point of this is to share information, to share research, and get the message out and get to the truth, then it's going to be done by folks like you and me and the important people that we think are doing important work, having them on the show and getting the word out there our way. That doesn't involve spending hundreds of thousands of dollars and hopping on a plane and going across the country and being on somebody else's terms. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah, well, to give an example of the latter, I've talked to Walt Brown a lot over the years and read a lot of the stuff he's written, and that was the big complaint he had about the conferences. Is he, wrote multiple books, done. I would say he's. I don't want to rank people, but let's say he's one of the top 12 or 20 researchers, and he would go at these conferences, and they would just. Give him, or John Judge was the one he was really complaining about. They would just give him like 15 minutes of time, and they're not paying they're not paying any of your expenses to go out there or anything. It's just kind of as a speaker.
Oh, I know. So, not taking anything away from John Judge. He was a great researcher.
Sure.
But John Judge loved to listen to John Judge talk, and that's not a bad thing. But I think Walt Brown's one of the top 5 researchers ever. I mean, You can't take away his chronology. I mean, somebody that spent that much time, 30-some thousand pages, not to mention the other books he's written on the case, but to put everything ever known about the Kennedy assassination into a chronology and index it deserves to be embroidered in, deserves a statue it's a 6th floor museum. I mean, just that work alone is amazing to me that he's done all that.
Well, he's one of the rarities too, in the sense that he's someone that wrote a book or multiple books and also has been able to say when he was mistaken about something or has changed his mind, because there's things he supported in the past that he no longer does now.
But that's important to do in this case for sure, because as we were talking before the show, what you thought at the beginning of your journey is not what you believe now. And I guarantee you've changed your mind probably 5 or 6, 7, maybe more times since then, as is the case with me. The more you look into this thing, the more you research, the more you read, the more documents you stumble across, the more help you get from people that are doing great research. It opens your eyes to other possibilities that you have to take into consideration and just not dismiss them out of hand. I used to dismiss the whole mafia angle out of hand, dude. Oh, no way. Nope. I don't want to hear nothing about it. Nope. And now I'm a little different, okay? I'm a little different because for years I've been hearing people like Diogenio downplay the whole mafia side of things and how bad the HSCA was and they got it wrong and this, that, and the other. But the more you actually look into things and see the connections for yourself, it just kind of makes you go, you can't just dismiss things out of hand anymore.
Sure can't. And my mind's not made up, and I still got an open mind to lots of questions about the case. Well, thanks for taking all this time to talk with me and my listeners, and I recommend that people check out your show. I'm going to add some links to it with the notes for this podcast. For a couple of your shows, you've done several about Larry Crayford, the Tippett shooting, Prayer Man, 3 topics that you touched on, so that'd be good for people to first encounter your stuff, and hopefully you'll get some new subscribers out of taking the time to talk with me, and we'll definitely have to do it again and keep in touch.
Yeah, for sure, Mike. I appreciate you having me on, and folks, if you like what you hear today and you want to hear more, there's 160 some odd shows that I've done in the past, and I've got more in the vault. Just look for me, Google the Lone Gunman Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, anywhere you can listen to podcasts, you can find the Lone Gunman Podcast. Or Quick Hits, JFK, news and notes that I do with my buddy Doug. And also I guest host quarterly on the Midnight Rider news show. And all that stuff can be found where you find the Lone Gunman. And you can follow me on Twitter at the Lone Gunman 7, or follow the page on Facebook. Just search for the Lone Gunman Podcast.